acts as a legal Good evening and welcome to the September 8, 2021 meeting of the Civil Service Commission. Could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Astorian?
Here.
Commissioner Haratunian?
Here.
Commissioner McCarley?
Here.
Sheriff Kerrigan?
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Gazarian is absent.
What's next?
Minutes for the meeting of June 9, 2021.
Any motion to approve? I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. McCarley was not present, but Mr. Saturian and Mr. Artunian were. So a motion to approve that those minutes?
I was actually not present either.
It says June 9th.
Oh, the June 9th?
Yes,
Yes,
June 9th.
I was absent for the August, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Any motion to approve that? The minutes on those?
I will move to approve.
I'll second that.
Move and a second, unanimous approval. August 11th meeting, neither Mr. McCarley nor Mr. Artunia were here. Accordingly, we're going to leave that for, I don't think we have enough people to actually approve those minutes. So I think we need to postpone that to the next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay,
Chair
Madam-
Period, I think on the July meeting, we have one abstention, correct?
One abstention. Well, Mr. McCarty was absent and Mr. Gazarian was absent. So Mr. McCarty, I apologize. You're right. I apologize. Mr. McCarty, I'm assuming that you're abstaining from voting on that, correct?
I would abstain since I was not in attendance at the August meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Warpetian. What's next?
Oral communications, we have none.
No oral communication. What's next?
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Stoyle?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is our recruitment and examination status report for the current time. This is a report that indicates all of our active recruitments by position, by department, filing periods, and dates of exams. We continue to see a fairly high an active level of recruitment, a lot in the police department, water and power department, total of 62 recruitments at some stage right now. If the commission has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, this is a note and file item.
Any questions? No questions? What's next?
Eligible list established.
Ms. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is our eligible list that have been established since our last meeting 1 month ago. As you can see, again, pretty busy time, a lot of recruitments, a lot of lists being established. In this time period, we have 10 lists, 6 of them promotional, 4 of them open. Again, this is a note and file item, but if the commission does have any questions on this report, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? Hearing none, what's next?
Class specifications for approval, customer service field technician series and customer service field supervisor.
Mr. Doyle?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a class specification for approval involving a series. It's the customer service field technician series, as well as the customer service field supervisor position as well. This is obviously within the water and power department. These job series are being updated to address largely updated technology. These specifications are relatively old. This is a work group that years ago, they were primarily responsible for handling shutoffs of electricity and a lot of field work. But the profession has changed significantly. The last 10 to 15 years, the city has installed smart meters. And I think you'll remember, of course, everyone on the commission are Glendale residents. With regard to the smart meters, these employees are largely responsible for addressing troubleshooting and other maintenance issues with the meters and extracting that data from those meters as well. Again, the job has changed a lot more technical, a lot more automation oriented. So there are significant changes, as you see a lot of underlining, a lot of red on your specifications. The other thing, because it's been a while since these have been updated, we did add a lot of the more contemporary boilerplate language that has been added to each of these specifications over the last few years. A lot of information on here within these 2 specifications, and if there's questions that the commission has, we'd be happy to try and answer them for you. Mr. Ando Vardanian from my staff worked on this with Glendale Water and Power, and we have Miriam Padron, who's customer service manager with GWP, is here in case you have more detailed questions.
Any questions? Okay, I just have one comment. Providing exceptional customer service practices to those services, that particular item, I think, in my opinion, just for being a citizen of the city, is, in my opinion, extremely important. For the staff to provide exceptional customer service, could we put that on a separate heading on its own to basically just highlight that that's a very important item instead of just kind of bunching it with 50, 20 other items and just kind of, it doesn't really show. In my opinion, the most important item for any employee, in my opinion, is to provide exceptional customer service to citizens of the city of Glendale. If you're planning, if you're zoning, if you're in GWP, but when we put it in a just a line item, in about 20 other lines, it just kind of loses its importance. So just to highlight it, how could we highlight it when we would have a separate category for it or separate highlight for it, or I don't know what we would do.
Mr. Chair, Chair Abkarian, are you referring to it under the knowledge of skills abilities or under the essential functions of the job? Because we could.
I'm talking about ability to, and then it says like provide exceptional customer service, but it's I think that should be the number one. So I don't know how we can highlight that, or that would be people and would understand that's the most important thing to do as a representative of City of Glendale is to provide exceptional customer service to its citizens. And I would like to see that as a separate heading or separate location for it where it's really highlighted. It doesn't, get lost with the other 40 other lines in here. So I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, Mr. Doyle, but
The Chair Karian,
yes.
that your point is well taken, and we can certainly move it up from where it's at, so it doesn't get lost in. If we did something separate and apart, I don't know how we would categorize that or list it if under its own heading, or so I'm not sure how we would necessarily do that. But we can certainly prioritize it and put it right at the top as the number one, either essential function or ability to within the specification.
Yeah,
format here.
I personally would appreciate if we can do that. I think Mr. Commissioner McCarley has a question or
Yes, Chair, what you suggested has been adopted on the commercial side. It falls within that new area, not so new anymore, called Customer Resource Management, CRM. And so as a section head, I think we could indeed identify the extent to which the employee must interface and interact with customers, with the residents of the city of Glendale. You can say constitutes 40% of the job, extensive customer relationships required, superior communication skills, something of that nature. Could be pretty quick, but the entry would be under customer resource management and relations.
Mr. Doyle, do you have any comments in adding a customer relations management heading into this? I know it's something completely as separate heading altogether, but maybe either that, or I'm okay with Mr. Doyle. I'm okay with you moving that all the way on top and just underlining it and highlighting it as the first item on ability two. That I'm okay. I'm personally okay with that. Just that would really highlight it, and as long as you put it on the first line and you underline it, I think that would really highlight that that's what you're looking for.
Certainly. Okay, Mr. Chair, Commissioner McCarley, I think we can incorporate both of those suggestions into this, and it's particularly for this type of a position. I think I agree with you both. Customer service is not only essential, but it's a primary component of this job. So we can certainly amend this to place a greater emphasis both in the placement of that term as well as a greater emphasis on that. So we'll work on that. And if you want to make if anyone wants to make a motion and to direct staff as amended, we'll certainly do so.
Mr. Commissioner McCarley? Commissioner McCarthy, we can't hear you. I think your mic is off.
With respect to the following motion, I would move that staff be directed to incorporate in all bulletins and job descriptions a discrete and separate section entitled Customer Relations. That section would, in brief terms, describe the degree to which the employee will interact with the residents and others within the community of Glendale as part and parcel of their assigned duties. And that should represent best practice and the highest level of customer assistance.
Okay, so now I understand that's a little bit different than what we were, I think, planning to do. I think what Ms. McCarty, if you're okay with this suggestion, that we bring that issue back on the next meeting to actually be discussed, so all the other commissioners could give input in reference to this particular bulletin. I think if it's okay with you all, and I think we might have lost Mr. Artunian. I think that if it's okay with you all, I think all I want to do, oh, there he comes. All I would like to do is just bring that particular item up to the first line and just highlight it for now. And then what we can do is for the next meeting, Mr. Doyle, if we can just bring that item back for discussion.
All right, I'll withdraw my motion based upon both guidance from the chair and as well a representation. I expect to hear such a representation that regarding this bulletin, that reference to quality customer service will find its way toward the top portion of the bulletin.
Could we get a second on that, please?
I'll second that.
Mr. Astorian, second. Could we get roll call on that, please?
Commissioner Astorian,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley,
Yes.
Sheriff Carey.
Yes. Thank you. And then that also, let me just, can we get a motion to get all three of these items approved? Two, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Mr. McCarthy?
I would move that as per the chair's guidance, that this matter be brought forth before the commission at its next regularly scheduled meeting so as to incorporate the comments, suggestions, and of fellow commissioners. The intent being that if fellow commissioners see value to a modification of the bulletin template, that it would the commissioners would then so direct the Human Resource Director to move forward and incorporate that addition.
Okay,
Chair
Mr. McCarty,
Carrion,
go ahead.
Chair
Mr.
Carrion,
McCarty, I think that one, it's just a recommendation for us to bring it back. So I don't
Yeah,
think we
that's
need a
correct.
motion.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't. My request was if you can have a motion to get the series approved, actually.
Oh, that's a different motion. Oh, that's an easy one. We just move that this particular bulletin and the series be approved as described and explained by the Human Resource Director.
Any second? Mr. Hartunian has raised his hand, seconding it. Could we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Astorian,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley,
Yes.
Sheriff Carey.
Yes. But I'm sorry, Ms. Varpetian, did you have a comment by any chance?
no, sir, you covered it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. What's next?
Experience requirements for general classification.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, last month, Chair Abkarian requested that staff prepare a report on experience requirements for our jobs and class specifications and whether or not some type of standardization might be warranted. This is a good topic, particularly for this commission, as you do see a number of these specifications each month. Thus, we had Russ Kwan prepare a report on the subject. Russ has dealt a lot with these issues, both in his current job and his previous position. I think if we have Russ here, if he could give a brief overview of his report and open this up for questions from the commission. So, Russ?
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Russ Kwan, Senior Human Resources Analyst. The report I've submitted for consideration to the commission was requested by Chair Abkarian during the August 11th, 2021 meeting. During that meeting, Chair Abkarian had made a request to discuss the possibility of standardizing the years of experience threshold for all of our positions within the city. To answer the chair's question, I did provide a short overview in my report of the general HR approach to establishing class specification experience thresholds. In addition to that, discuss some of the factors and considerations that we as staff see and consider when setting such requirements. So first off, I'd like to go ahead and discuss establishing minimum requirements. So whenever we establish minimum requirements for any of our class specifications, staff will work with our hiring managers to ensure that first the job descriptions are used that we're using are timely, and that the duties and functions listed are accurate. And we work also with them to make sure that we also have our expectations within the industry standard as well. So in setting the requirements for experience, education, knowledge, skills, and abilities, we're also looking to focus on an incumbent's ability to perform the job upon hire, not necessarily waiting for the candidate to mature and grow within the position, but rather what is required to satisfactorily perform the duties of the position immediately. So the first factor for consideration is the level of the position. So in general, entry-level classifications will not generally require any experience, whereas a journey level, senior, and supervisory level, because there's a higher expectation of technical expertise, there is a greater expectation in terms of the amount of experience that will be required to successfully do that job. In my report, I've used the customer service series as an example. So within that series, we have 3 classifications: customer service assistant, customer service representative, as well as a senior customer service representative position. Customer service assistant is the entry-level classification, and as such, that classification does not require any experience. But as you can see in that chart, as you progress through that classification series, the experience requirement does progressively increase. Second is the nature and the duties of the occupation for the classification we're looking at. So there are certain fields or occupations that will place a greater amount of emphasis on the work experience as well as hands-on training. To illustrate this factor, I would like to use the trade occupations as an example. So in that second chart, I do have the listings for plumber, carpenter, and electrician. So basically, all 3 of these classifications, the requirements listed, are the entry-level classifications to the city of Glendale. So different from the customer service assistant, where no experience was required, for plumber, carpenter, and electrician, there is experience required to enter into the city workforce in those particular classifications.
Mr. Kwan, do you mind if we ask questions as we go on? Because there might not be, would that be okay with the rest of the commissioners? If you guys have questions, you guys chime in, because at this point, I have a real question. This is what somebody else did ask me, so I'm going to ask it. Why put 4 years and then jump to 7 years instead of 6 years? Why pick these odd numbers once in a while? Transparency is everything, and that's exactly what I'm trying to get to people, that these numbers just don't come out of the air. It's thought of. It's based on the requirements of the division, based on what the division needs, based on number of hours. So why instead of I can see the 4 years and 4 years, why not 6 years? Why 7 years?
Mr. Chair, there's a lot of factors with that. I don't know in particular with regards to, let's say, electrician, why it is 7 years of experience. But I can discuss something along the lines of the customer service series, where there is a gap between individual classifications. So you do want to establish a certain level of experience within a class before you feel that the incumbent or the employee has gained the experience and technical expertise needed to progress to that higher level. So a lot of things could be looked at. We could look at the industry standard. We could look at the organization in terms of what supervisor there may be a threshold for senior level positions within the city or within an organization. So yeah, without necessarily going into a specific example, there are factors that we look at in terms of how much time is needed to gain the experience and technical expertise in order to progress forward to a higher level, or more importantly, what's needed to effectively do the job on day one upon hire.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Kwan, I'm sorry.
Oh, very good. Okay, so lastly, so we talked about the trade occupations where they do place a higher threshold or a greater emphasis on hands-on experience as well as work experience opposed to traditional or formal education. The last factor that we generally look at is occupations where formal education as well as professional licensure is a focal point. So in this case, I wanted to look at the civil engineering area. So for the city of Glendale, we have two series that deal with civil engineering. We have the civil engineering series as well as the civil engineer series. So for somebody who has no experience but has a bachelor's degree in engineering, civil engineering, or an engineering training certificate, they are able to join the city workforce or qualify to join the city workforce as within the civil engineering assistant as well as the civil engineering associate classifications. However, if the employee or the incumbent would like to progress higher into the civil engineer classifications, we would require them to not only have higher levels of professional experience, but then in addition to that, we would require a professional licensure as a professional engineer within the state of California. So in that case, that is the requirement threshold that is set by the industry standard. And then lastly, and as the Commission knows, we regularly bring to you classifications for reevaluation on terms of the experience requirements. A lot of times we've developed these class specifications years ago, and the nature of the job changes, the complexity of the work changes to the point that we may need to require a higher level of experience, a higher level of expertise in a particular area. So as that happens, we do want to stay current. We want to be able to provide our hiring departments with the best qualified candidates to perform functions and duties needed. So in that case, we'll go ahead and bring that to you for adjustment. Like stated in the report, we did have a recent example of that in the August 11th meeting where we had the homeless programs coordinator minimum requirements changed, where we raised the minimum requirements from 2 years to 3 years of recent experience, simply because the work that is involved, the grant funding that's involved, became a little more complex. So the hiring department requested that they have candidates that have a little more experience, a little more exposure in that particular area to join the workforce and contribute immediately. So in summary, a one-size-fits-all approach in determining the experience requirements for all positions may not necessarily be the most effective approach. However, I can understand the concern, confusion that having different levels of experience would cause for individuals. So this is my report. I presented it to you for your review as well as discussion and questions.
Any questions from the commissioners?
I have one.
Mr. Artuni?
Yeah, Mr. Ross, thank you for your report. You mentioned when you're evaluating and studying industry standards, just curious, are those standards of other municipalities, or are those private sector standards, or both?
It's depending on the position. For most of our comparable classifications, we do look at other cities, primarily because we're dealing with the same labor market. But if we do have a position where we may be the only city that has that classification, we may have to look at private organizations just as a guideline, not necessarily as the rule or the determining factors, but it does help on occasion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for
Assessor
Mr.
Sorian,
Kwan.
please go ahead.
I'm going to go back to your electrician, carpenter, and plumber example for a moment, if you don't mind. The education requirement is listed as graduating from high school or attainment of GED. What if, for example, on the electrician case, you had somebody that had gone to a trade school and had 2 years of training in electrical stuff? Then would that 7 years drop? Would that change? Is that in conjunction with the experience and the school? How would that work? Or the same thing for 4 years for carpenter and 4 years for plumber in that matter?
Mr. Kwan or Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Historian, so do have a substitution clause on our classifications where it does say an equivalent combination of experience, education, and or training may substitute for the listed minimum requirements. So that is a possibility, but although I will say for that substitution clause, it is enacted on a case-by-case basis. So to say that we're going to take a trade to make a blanket statement that we would necessarily always utilize somebody's training or certification to reduce the number of years of experience, we have to look at the whole picture before making that type of determination. But I will say, though, that for a lot of these trade classifications, there are apprentice programs. And so with those apprentice programs, that's where we can focus in on the hands-on training as well as the work experience factors.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Historian, if I could elaborate on that as well. Russ mentioned the substitution clause, which is contained within every class specification, and he's completely correct that if there is an example of some degree of education that can be education or specific training or trade school that can be substituted for the listed minimum requirements, we would consider that. And I want the commission to be aware that this is not done indiscriminately. Any requests to deviate from the existing listed minimum requirements do come up through my office to my level, and I have to make the final call on that. And it happens frequently. But I think the example that Commissioner Historian gave is a really good one, because there are some excellent trade schools and apprenticeship programs that teach things such as carpentry or plumbing skills or electrical skills that it would be really appropriate to give that some consideration when looking at candidates. And Russ also mentioned, though, that there are a lot of factors involved, and sometimes the factors in considering that have to do with the number of applications or the applicant pool that's available. If we have 400 applicants for a particular position, we're typically going to go with those that have the most relevant experience, education, as set forth in the job description. If there's a much smaller group and we're not getting a solid candidate pool, we might end up having to be a little more liberal on the interpretation of that. So anyway, very good question. I do want to speculate as well. With that grouping of the trades classifications where you have plumber, carpenter, and electrician, those are technically all at the same level. They're not a progression. And you see two that have 4 years of skilled experience, and the electrician is requesting 7. And again, I'm not entirely certain as to why it's so much higher for electrician, but my sense is that it probably has to do with the safety aspect and the level of hazards associated with being electrician, where there frequently are accidents and injuries of a serious nature, as compared to someone who does plumbing and general carpentry.
Okay, any other questions by any of the commissioners? Any comments? I have just a couple of comments. First of all, I love the engineering series because it just rhymes so nicely. It goes from 0 to 2 to 4 to 6 to 8. It's beautiful. It's just clean. It just looks clean. Yeah, there's got to be a reason why we ask for 7, and in no way would I ever substitute my judgment for any of the experts in the area. I just want the public to know that when we say 7 or we say 5 or we say 3, these numbers just don't come out of the air. There's a progression of numbering that we need to go through. So if there's something that says 7, there's probably something that says 5 or a 3 ahead of it. So for people just to know that we don't just kind of do our years to fit the person who wants to get the job, so to speak. That's not what happens, or I know that's not what happens. So I just want the public to know that that's not why the numbers change. I do love to see the progression be in even numbers because it's just so much cleaner. So if you by any chance could get them on even numbers, it's cleaner. But if there is an odd number, just for the public to know that it's not just that somebody picks a number just so we can hire someone. It doesn't happen like that. There's a lot of checks and balances. Mr. Doyle makes sure that that there are rigorous, review of all of this information. And I just want to make sure that I understand, Mr. Doyle, you're the only one who makes the decision to change the requirements of any of it. So if it says you need 4 years and you substitute that with experience, you're the one who makes that call, correct?
Chair Carrion, pretty much so. And I want to clarify, we're talking specifically about the use of the substitution clause. I am the only
That is correct.
If a job says 8 years experience, someone has 4. It's not like you can call up Mr. Doyle and say,
No.
candidate.
No, yeah. No, I'm talking about if somebody has
a compelling reason that their education, they might have a bachelor's degree when the job doesn't require it, or a master's degree, and they say, how about some credit for that, for having that advanced degree, even though I'm a year and a half shy of the experience requirement. Those are the types of things we're talking about.
Yeah, we don't want anyone to. We don't want Mr. Doyle to get 20 calls tomorrow to get things substituted as of tomorrow morning, or Mr. Kwan for that matter. Any other questions?
Mr. Abkarian, Chair
Yes.
Abkarian, if I could just add,
Please.
under this agenda item, if there was a general consensus on the issue of the customer service placement on a bulletin, you may be able to address it here instead of bringing back a report the next meeting. I think that the conversation was whether or not where on the bulletin you could place it. If there is consensus here and there's general direction, you would be able to
I think,
provide that direction.
Ms. Warpetian, one of the only reasons was I think it's an important enough item that I would like to have Mr. Gazarian available as well. All
Gotcha.
5 of us to be there. And I'd rather, if you don't mind, having it on the next meeting, and I'm hoping that everyone will be at the next meeting, including Mr. Gazarian, so he can, provide us with his comments as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Nothing else? What's next?
Reports.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, just quickly, we have the past due grid showing our past due performance evaluations. The organization continues to do a very good job keeping up with the evaluations, and with the commission's direction, we've attained some very good compliance. We have just 2 departments that have first notice late evaluations, no second or third notices. As a result of that, you have no department heads here to explain their second and third notices. It's quite a good deterrent. And as you can see, the vast majority of the departments have no past due evaluations. So with
Great.
that, if you have questions, again, be happy to answer those.
Any questions by any of the commissioners? No? What's next?
Civil Service Commission staff comments.
Any comments by anyone? Mr. Doyle, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chair, and I don't want to steal your thunder or anyone else's, but as you all know, Commissioner Gazarian is not present for today's meeting, and I just wanted to point out he is mourning the loss of his father, who passed away last week. And I think it would be appropriate for the commission to adjourn this meeting in the memory of Garo's father, Barkev Gazarian, if that's appropriate, sir.
I agree with you 100%. I was going to make a comment, but thank you, Mr. Doyle, for making that comment on behalf of the commission. I think all commissioners agree with what you just said, and I think we would adjourn this meeting having that in mind. Any objections? We are adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.